What's up, gang? Sin here, and I hope everybody's having a great week. I was browsing the Twitter space last night and saw some leaks for Uprising, which is the next Flesh and Blood set due out later in June of 2022. And I took it upon myself to read the Journey into the Forgotten, Iyslander's Journey lore piece that kind of is going to lead us into this next 5 days of leading up to official previews. I think official previews are coming after this. I mean, we're already seeing new cards, so we're getting pretty close to it. I personally am very excited to see what happens in this set from a lore perspective. I have yet to actually do a lore video on this channel for anything I've ever done before. So today I wanted to kind of do a lore breakdown because, I mean, I've steeped myself into multiple franchises of fantasy and gaming, and, you know, I recognize a lot of tropes, and I can kind of tell where things seem to be heading, or the direction things seem to be heading. And, you know, we got Morlock Hill, which was the previous lore piece that kind of hinted that, you know, we're going into this war for Wraith against the light and the dark, and it's no longer just the light and the dark. We're fighting, you know, Sawana, which is the bastion city we saw in Monarch, the city of light where Dorinthia is from, where Minerva Themis is from, Prism, all of that. They're currently in the middle of a battle against the forces of Arathiel and the Demonastery. If you're not familiar with the lore that I'm talking about, please go check that out on the Flesh and Blood website. And same with the lore that I'm about to kind of read here and break down. Read it for yourself. Genuinely read it for yourself and kind of pick it apart. I've read this multiple times, but I wanted to come out here and, you know, read this with you guys and kind of give you my thoughts and talk a little bit about what I'm noticing and where I think this story thread is heading. So without further ado, this is Iyslander's Journey, and I'm going to do a little breakdown of it, and we'll talk about it after I'm done. Now, Iyslander is the ice wizard that we were introduced to leading into Everfest. She is currently kind of, it seems almost like solo out in the Bleak Expanse, which is this giant, like, tundra of frost in the middle of the mountains of Aria, where not much can survive, given that it is completely covered in ice. I believe nearby it, from the world lore map perspective, Eisen's Peak, which is home to Eisenloft from the Tales of Aria set. That's kind of like, it's in the general area there. I mean, I know Oldhim has something to do with that area. But the Bleak Expanse is currently where Iyslander has been sort of hiding out, I guess. And, yeah, we're going to get into that. So let's get into that. Iyslander's Journey. So Journey into the Forgotten, this is the first piece. It was written by Edwin McRae, edited by Rachel Reese, and illustrated by Sam Yang, who has done a lot of work for Flesh and Blood already and is absolutely fantastic artist. So we're going to just kind of get to reading. You know, the chilling air is sweet to my taste, wind that would cut the skin of another's caress is mine. It blows a shower of ice shavings from my snarling creation, its fury captured and frozen, sinuous, scaled, and horned. It is a fleeting ghost from my past, those hot and hated memories locked away behind glacial walls in my mind. This is no creature of the Bleak Expanse. So something's happening with Iyslander here. She's kind of beginning to remember things from her past that were previously kind of locked out of her mind, like blocked out of her mind. So something is compelling her here to you know, kind of move forward, and like those walls in her mind are starting to slowly come down. And that's what leads us into this story. And as you can see here, you know, Iyslander is posed with some of her animal friends. You know, she is literally Flesh and Blood's Elsa. And she has a totem here that's emphasized in the art that almost looks like a dragon, right? Where others cannot, I live in contentment, alone in my body, yet accompanied by spirit. I have everything I need right now. So why do unbidden tears freeze upon my cheeks? Why must I yearn for what has been? Why must I know that which has been forgotten? The spell rises to answer my questions, a storm that rages from heart to throat to tongue. My fingers dance through the falling snowflakes as I make my demand to the ever-winter spirits. At first, their protests are gentle, mere murmurs of the breeze, then adamant, a wind that stirs the snow tugs at my dress, then furious, tearing at my resolve with a gale of frustration. My statues, the mountain, the pale plain, I lose all in the blinding white. Then it is over. The wind drops to an apologetic whisper. The air clears and my spell reveals the path that will lead me into the past. So it looks like, she's kind of doing this like reflection. She's out in the bleak expanse, it's snowing, and she kind of does something with her magic to kind of like reveal a path where to she doesn't even know. She's kind of just following whatever this spirit is telling her to go. It could be a metaphor for a spirit, or it could be a literal like spirit that resides within her, that something that's drawing her somewhere, right? So as you can see here, I look back at the frozen lands that have been my home for many years. While my past remains walled off, I can recall every day since with crystal clarity. A youthful girl, shivering in a field as blank and white as the memory of how I got there. A cave of snow opening like a warm embrace. So she was young when she showed up in the bleak expanse, but she was a young girl. She was not, an adult. She was not necessarily, she may not have even necessarily been a baby at that point in time. She was very clearly a young girl who just wound up in this field of snow, this very volatile and brutal tundra in Aria. So spirits spoke to me in words of cooling compassion, teaching me to harness the winter within. Kindred kindness of frost and time that raised me into the woman I am now. I stepped from the melting snow into a lush field of wildflowers. Akeo bounds into the meadow from a copse of white dusted beach, and eyes me with curiosity. I see the glint of spirit behind the fox's gaze. My icekin have sent me a guide. So, going back to this initial piece, she's being guided by frost spirits, and something inside of her is able to hear and listen to these ice spirits or these frost spirits, and she refers to them as icekin. I follow my companion through the verdant countryside of Aria. We skirt the lively towns, the trundling tinker caravans, and the roving bands of raucous entertainers. We travel at night in the cool of the dark. Although Aria is beautiful, I am glad when we reach the great tree of Corsham. We're in Aria. The caravans, very obviously Everfest, so she kind of passes by Everfest, and my answers lie beyond this cosseted land, and its flow will send me on my way. My Kaio guide fares me well with a lick of my fingertips, and with a flick of its tail, it is gone. So this fox spirit leads her to the edge of Aria, then disappears. A breeze rustles the canopy of this mighty tree, and I fall like a leaf from its branches. Icelander's leaving home, leaving everything she's ever known to go towards whatever is drawing her in. So she makes it to Solana, where there's currently a battle going on, or the tail end of a battle going on, between Solana and the voices in the fight at Morlock Hill. Again, go read that lore, whatnot. And she's going through all of these previous locations we've been in, almost kind of going back. So here we are. She's in Solana. Within the reddened Solanian dusk, I reel from a world at war. Long have I cherished the peace of ice, the slow settling of snow. Time passes with glacial calm in the bleak expanse. Now I witness the inferno of battle, the steaming heat of spilled blood. A dark-skinned warrior leads with his metal-clad army against creatures so grotesque that my stomach churns. A fiend breaks away from its horde, smelling my presence even through the gore-soaked air. It charges, gibbering and slavering. Before it can lay its cruel hands upon me, I freeze the beast's blood in its veins. This is very obviously a creature of the monastery. Iyslander was there during the fight. She was it seems like she might have just been passing through, but she was there for the fight. And as you may know, this is actually one of the creatures that is on the Shadow Brute card, Endless Maw. I wipe sweat from my forehead, the first time I can recall doing so. My heart pounds fast and hot. I am so far from my icekin that this one incantation has sapped my will, and through a crack in my weary mind, a recollection wriggles free. A feeling, slick and coiling within my chest. Fear. I flee this valley of violence, chased by the roars of the monstrous, the screams of the dying. Anxiety tugs at my heart, drawing me southward through the scorched remains of Solana strife, up into the blackened mountains with smoking peaks and fissures that spew sulfur and ash. At an archway, in a rugged pass, I remember a name, Volkor. So she passes, she leaves the Bleak Expanse at the guidance of this Ice Fox spirit guide, which leads her to the edge of Aria. She walks through Solana, and as she's going through Solana, she begins to get hunted by the forces of the monastery. So she's on the run. And she heads towards Volkor. Now, this is where it gets interesting. This is our setting for Uprising. I follow a path winding and rugged. It takes me above the pass, though the way is hard and treacherous. High in the mountains, I find the remains of a group of travelers, their bones scattered by predators, picked clean by scavengers. They were coming the opposite way. A desperate flight through dangerous country. In a weathered pack, I find garments, rough and patched, in a cloak with a hood. As I dress in their clothes, my heart is full of dread. What were these people running from? At last, I descend into the foothills and stop to listen to the rumbling of wagons, their trays protesting under the weight of black sooty rock. Ahead, men and women carve open a hill with picks and shovels. Armed warriors watch over them, scarves wrapped around their faces to ward off the dust. A woman in fine robes sits astride her horse, surveying the dismal scene with calculating eyes. Her manner scratches at the ice around my memories. Have I known someone like this? So this is our first hint here. We're kind of uncovering and piecing Iyslander's history together. She points at a worker who has stopped to rest. Warriors grab the helpless man, drag him before their mistress. She dismounts and draws a whip from her saddlebag. The crack of leather against flesh makes my skin burn with sympathy. My bones ache with frigid anger. I draw upon the woman's own sweat to encase her arm in ice. Her shocked eyes find me among the rocks. Her harsh voice barks in order. Warriors charge, sabers drawn and brandished. I throw my will against a stack of water barrels. They explode into splinters of ice and wood that cut through the warriors, leaving them reeling and bloody. The workers do not waste this opportunity. Some attack their former overseers with pick and shovel. Others flee, and I flee with them into the gathering dusk. So here, Iyslander stumbles upon what seems to be a slave or prison camp in Volkor. When she's identified, she brutally injures a bunch of the warriors that were coming after her. This signals the workers to essentially rise up against their oppressors. I am hunted. The woman must have had influence to go with her riches. Soldiers patrol the roads directed by a general whose armor is black as his long raven hair. The creak and clink of their scale mail sets my teeth on edge. Yet despite the risk, I am drawn to the edge of a walled town. I have glimpsed this town before through the swirling snowstorm that veils my history. I break open a side gate with a snap frost and steal into the narrow streets. Fleeting enemies lead me to a handsome apothecary, guarded by a pair of soldiers. In this window stands a man, his face concealed by shadow. He is richly dressed, much like the merchant at the quarry, and holds a pot of alchemical powder in his gloved hand. A girl sits outside on a wooden bench, her smock tattered and grubby, her feet bare, her fair hair cropped short and ragged. A shout from the street shatters the reflection. Man and girl fade back into the past as a sizzling ball smashes through the window. The apothecary explodes into flames. And with that, LSS introduces our first alchemist hero and kills him off immediately. See what I did there? I sneak away while all eyes are turned on the commotion. From then on, I avoid the fear-fortified settlements, the Raven General's patrols, and the daily injustices that infest this troubled land. I lose count of the days as I continue on my journey. So at this point, multiple days have passed. The burning heart of Volkor laid out before me. Sprawling cities spread across glassy plains of Tefra. At the center of this mess of humanity, a tamed volcano shimmers and broods, its flank adorned with towers and halls that belittle all others in their grandeur. I recall a name, Shenlahar. To me, that city within cities is a locked chest, hiding heirlooms of forgotten import. I follow the road I am on to an outer city gate where a steady tide of citizens swells and ebbs. Hard-eyed officers examine every soul that passes through, their papers scrutinized and stamped. You will not get in looking like that. A storm of ice builds in my palm. After a long game of cat and mouse with the Raven General's troops, they have caught me at last. I turn to fight my captor, but the stranger takes my arm, arresting my spell with a firm yet gentle hand. She looks like a Volkai, caramel skin, jet black hair, clean and well kept. Though modest, a servant perhaps of a wealthy household, but I sense that is not all as it seems with this one. I let her guide me into a humble house, a bolt hole away from prying eyes where she can reveal her true self. It's Shiana. It's the shapeshifter Shiana. She's in Volcor for some reason. We're gonna get to that. Who are you? The less you know, the safer we will both be. She places her mask beside another on the table and murmurs some arcane words I cannot fathom. Before my astonished eyes, the second mask loses its blank porcelain pallor. It becomes a face, pleasant and practical. The humble features of the Volkai everywoman. Wear this mask and your visage will become one of Volcor's many. Even your own mother won't recognize you. My fists clench of their own accord. I don't know who my mother is, nor my father. I cover my pain with a question. Why are you helping me? The stranger's eyes see past the grime and dried blood in the depths of my icebound heart. I saw what you did at the coal quarry, how you forged ice from torrid air. A favor from such as you would be a powerful boon. I'll remind you of that when the time comes. With a wave of her hand, her snow-white hair gone, the face of the every woman has returned. She leaves without a word, not even looking back as I collect my gifts from the table. I shuffle with the wine, mimicking others, their slumped shoulders, the downcast eyes. As I reach the guard booth, a familiar figure steps out from the tent behind it. His raven hair is pulled tightly back from his chiseled face. He watches as the gate guard takes and reads my parchment. I make myself as still as a glacier beneath the general's inscrutable gaze, freezing any thought of my imminent capture. The guard grunts, stamps my parchment with red, and motions for me to move on. The general turns away, his dark eyes trawling through the line of travelers behind me. I hurry on, eyes down, and only allow myself to look up when I am well beyond the gate. The city surrounds me, its heat pressing against my skin, so dry in my lungs that I fight for breath. Streams of melted ice pour from the frozen walls of my mind, pulling behind my eyes. Fleeting images slip through the widening cracks, a grand residence with snarling dragons at the gate. Within that home, a library of scrolls, and a young girl cowering in a beshadowed corner. She works a lock of blonde hair between her bruised lips as her trembling fingers trace arcane words across yellow parchment. Her eyes are a glacial blue and reflect a longing I know all too well. Every fiber of my being yearns for the peace of my bleak expanse. I will return to my ice skin I have thus promised. From now I am here, facing the heat, a broken shard of ice in a land of fire, seeking to be made whole once more. So, there is a lot to unpack here, okay? There is a lot to unpack here. So, first off, Iyslander is on this journey, and for some reason it is leading her, it's almost like this finding herself journey, and it's leading her to the heart of Volcor, which is Shenlahar. It's a city within Volcor that we now have established, and I believe somebody on Twitter earlier today pulled up and mentioned what Shenlahar actually is. So, we're going to take a good look. Father Vismus and Reese Robin, thank you for posting this when we were discussing it on Twitter today. Shen equals god or similar. Lahar is volcano related. So it's essentially just like the God's city, like God's volcano. Okay. So it's pretty suffice to say that Shenlahar is almost like the capital of, it's like the capital of Volcor. Now, what's interesting, and the most interesting piece of all of this is, and I suggested this on Twitter, and a lot of people agreed with me. There is evidence in here that obviously Iyslander's from Volcor. As a young girl, she wound up in the Bleak Expanse and was taken in by these fox spirits, and kind of had her power trained, you know, through that. So that tells me that Iyslander is of a bloodline, because in the Flesh and Blood lore, at least when it comes to Volcor, wizards can only really exist if they are able to channel ether to some degree. Kano is one of them. He gets his ether from the volcano in Volcor. We don't know much about Kano other than, you know, he is of an ancestral royal blood. It's pretty obvious to kind of like piece that together, at least this point in time. Now, what's not to say there that the ether doesn't necessarily apply to a specific element, where if there were to be a young girl from Volcor equally as talented to get lost in Aria, she could maybe have ice spirits could maybe potentially commune with her, and she could pull ether from the Bleak Expanse, making her an ice wizard. Now, my theory goes, because if you really look at the art for young Iyslander, very clearly she's wearing Volkai garb, right? Her hair is nearly identical to Kano's. Before she becomes kind of like mastering ice, her hair begins to turn white. White is not her natural hair color. Her natural hair color is black. And she mentions familiarity with so much of Volcor's inner workings that I don't think it's that far off to say, knowing fantasy tropes as they are, that we might be building towards a reveal where Iyslander is somehow related to Kano. My first thought was, are they separated twins? Are they separated twins? And for some reason, some way, somehow, Iyslander was like exiled as a child from Volcor, and these Icekin were kind of like preventing her from remembering where she's from, because where there might be fire and hatred in Kano's heart, these Icekin know that this girl can be, you know, molded into like a peaceful person, and only if she tames her powers to do that. We don't have any evidence of Iyslander necessarily being evil in any way. So this is really interesting to me how they're setting this up for Uprising, and for Iyslander to take part in said Uprising. She appears to be the main character of this story. But the big reveal, the big thing, is that all of her memories lead her back to Volcor. And at one point in time, she looked very similar to Kano, who is another established character within the Flesh and Blood lore. So over the next 5 days, we may see more of that, but all of this is fantastic. LSS has been putting out fantastic lore, you know, great job on all the writers and editors and artists that work on this game. I'm very excited to see what happens up next with Uprising. If you'd like me to do more lore readings and kind of a breakdown of these lore readings, please let me know, and we can go from there. And anytime they put out something new, I could pop in and we could talk about it and do that. I mean, yeah. So it's, you know, we're basically here, especially since Iyslander states that she doesn't know who her mother is or her father, and that very much bothers her. And that leads me to believe we're inching towards this big reveal of who Iyslander really is. And it's so wild to me because she's a new character. You know, she came out of nowhere. She's a new character, but you are all like, LSS has done such a good job of already building so much intrigue around her and Volcor as a setting. So as they start to reveal more, as in the coming days, coming weeks, I'll be covering it here on the channel. Please let me know if you like this video. If you did like this video and you made it all the way to the end, hit that subscribe button. It really helps out. And let me know your thoughts. What are you guys looking forward to in Uprising? Regardless, hope you all have a great weekend. Thank you so much. Sin out.